This is a video about slavery. We may get lost from time to time, but that's what this is about. So if my father is a drug trafficker and he dies, and I inherit all of his money, not his business, am I now evil? I've never had any part of that business. Yes, my, always having good food on the table and my access to prime rate education came from the money that was generated by the business, so I've certainly benefited from it. But I'm a chef, or a pediatrician, or a graphic designer. My parents never groomed me to be part of the business. As a matter of fact, I had no idea that it was a thing. I thought my dad sold pencils. But because of my inheritance, I have a lot of money now. I give some away to, the dog shelter that I've always wanted to give money to. I pay my taxes properly, I tip well at restaurants, and sometimes when I pass homeless people, I hand them a bill. Yet still I have benefited and continue to benefit from the suffering caused by my father's business. So do I share part of the blame? Do my children, when I die and they inherit the money? Do the children at the cancer ward that I sponsored? After all, if my father hadn't been a drug trafficker and made all that money, which then passed on to me, I would have never been able to pay for that cancer ward, and it wouldn't have existed. What about the prosperity that my father brought to his immediate surroundings? I'm not talking money given to my dad's lieutenants, but the local restaurants where the gangsters went to have a coffee, or the legitimate investment that was made by my dad into the town's local soda manufacturing company, or the maid that cleaned the summer house. My dad wasn't Al Capone, he paid his taxes. For that reason, one of the English teachers at my local high school didn't lose her job, as would have happened if not for the sudden cash influx coming from my dad. Does she share part of the blame? Or do the children that she educated well because she was very good at her job and a positive influence on these kids? If prosperity was created from suffering, how far do guilt and blame and responsibility travel with it? How do you calculate the blame of every single individual that benefited from tragedy and suffering, even and especially when they didn't choose to benefit from it? And what do you do with that guilt? I mean, what is it your responsibility to do now? It's clear that the transatlantic slave trade and the slavery that came from it, even after slavery was abolished, the economic oppression of African American people contributed greatly to the prosperity of the United States, and thus the prosperity of the United States as it stands today, because we do live in a universe where causality is a thing. That being said, only 2% of all people in America actually owned slaves back in the day. So even though everybody benefited and everybody continues to benefit, how much can modern people be blamed for that? And when I say everybody benefits, I mean everybody benefits. It's no secret that black people in America do not benefit a fraction of what white people in America benefit off the economy, but they still benefit more than they would have without slavery as an economic factor. What about the Japanese businessman whose family hasn't left Tokyo in 3 generations, but he sells microwaves overseas to American middle-class households who have benefited from the prosperity of slavery? There is a definitive argument to be made in favor of reparations for African American people and other minorities in America. After all, much of the wealth that white people inherited was stolen from black people and would have passed on to their descendants had it not been stolen. But do descendants of slave owners have to pay more in reparations? And what if you're descended from both slaves and slave owners? What if your ancestors were abolitionists? What if you are descended 100% from slave owners, but the Great Depression took away all of your family's wealth and now you live in a trailer park near Kingsman? What if your ancestors didn't live in the US while slavery was a thing? What if they were white indentured servants or trapped in factory towns? What if you're a recent immigrant from Africa whose ancestors benefited from the transatlantic slave trade by selling their fellow Africans to white Europeans? And who gets to benefit from these reparations? What if you're black, but none of your ancestors were slaves? What if your parents came over from Africa 50 years ago? Unless they're from Ethiopia, they were colonized by someone. Who gets to pay now? And how long are these things valid? I am the descendant of slaves, and I am the descendant of slave owners. I was born in Cologne, which was founded as a colony by the Roman Empire, and they used to practice a lot of slavery. Cologne literally derives from the Latin word colonia, which means colony. I also have some degree of Slavic ancestry, I have been told. And the word Slav, sort of, according to some etymologists, derives from the same root as the word slave. Or is the Roman slave trade okay because it happened 2,000 years ago? Will the transatlantic slave trade have been okay in the year 4000? There's a good to fair chance I'm a descendant of Genghis Khan, much like a huge portion of the world's population. Do I now share part of the blame for the unfathomable amounts of people he killed and had killed to build his empire? Or frankly, the women he raped? Go back far enough into anyone's ancestry. You will find serial killers and Samaritans. You will find rapists and revolutionaries, crooks and colonized subjects, slavers and slaves. I mean, Jesus, if we go back to the original example, John F. Kennedy was descended from bootleggers. He was a questionable character himself in some ways, but he was also a legitimate advocate for the working people. How much can anyone really be blamed for the circumstances of their birth? Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the things, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. I left all these questions open-ended for a reason, so that you would have the discussion about it. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, potentially buying some of the merchandise that I have on offer or my short story collection. And in that spirit, seriously, try to answer these questions. I can see a lot of different schools of morality diverging a lot here in the comment section of this video. And see you around, cunts.